So have you seen all the tents going up in the quarry here in the middle of Shrewsbury, in the Quarry Park?
Absolutely. So Oktoberfest will be in full swing this weekend.
Are you going?
We went last year. It was quite wet. I mean, the sun's going to come out this year, so we'll probably pop in Saturday afternoon. But it's fantastic, the quarry being used all the time.
Yeah. Now, Beth's done a good thing. She's the lady that runs a lot of the festivals, isn't she?
Yes, the food festival and Oktoberfest, and there's bands and obviously lots of people dressing up and getting a bit crazy.
Yeah, a few in their Bavarian outfits. I don't think there's much of a German theme to it, is there, apart from the name and a few of the fancy dress? The beer is sort of typical local craft beer, ale sort of.
It is, and it's more about people dressing up and in a big tent with lots of music. So there'll be some umpire music, but there won't be a lot of it. There'll be a lot of fun, I guess.
Yeah, good. Well, I might well pop in tonight myself and see Alex. It opens tonight, I think, doesn't it? It runs for the weekend. Yeah. And the river's been quite high recently. I was seeing that getting quite...
It has. So I live on the river. I've got a little boat which is floating higher than it normally would. So most of the neighbours have taken their boat off, but we're going to keep ours for another couple of weeks. My daughter's birthday, and we're hoping for a boat trip up the river.
How far upriver can you go before you run out of depth?
About 12 miles, but it's normally about half a metre, so it's normally fairly shallow. So you have to be quite careful where you go. You can hit the bottom with a motor, but it's
exciting.
I've
kayaked on it, but not been brave enough to take an outboard.
Yes, you have to know the river, but I've been on it 6 years now, and it changes every year. So the first time you go up, you have to be quite careful and just scope out where you're going. But it's good fun.
All right, well, I might see you at the Oktoberfest over the weekend.
Absolutely.
Should we start this podcast?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Hello and welcome again to the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow here in Shrewsbury. I'm Dave Parry from Wellmeadow, and today I've got a very special guest. I've got Chris Greenhough here with me from SDE. So good morning, Chris.
Hello and welcome.
Do you say SDE still, or do you spell out what it stands for?
No, it's SDE Technology. So I hope people now know, because we rebranded in 2019. So we were Salop Design and Engineering. So it's Salop Design Engineering, that's the SDE. And the technology is a bit of a look forward to lightweighting, new technologies, new investment within the business.
Right. We may come on to bits of that, certainly in respect of what we're talking about today, because we wanted to discuss, with you being not only a manufacturer, you're a commercial director at the firm, but you do a lot of work on the marketing side, and we're going to come on to how you do some around that and how you've inspired us. But you'll have a view as well, because you speak to so many other manufacturers about the challenges of marketing a manufacturing business. It's quite hard.
It's not easy, because you're not just promoting the business, you're promoting the product that you make. And a lot of people you speak to, certainly the general public, don't understand how, for example, a metal pressing is made, the processes, the jobs, anything about it. So you've got to convince them, what the company ethos is all about, and then convince them that you can make the product as well. So it's not easy.
And I don't want to be rude to the whole sector, but I don't think manufacturers are generally well known for being very good at their marketing. Would that be a fair point, do you think?
I would think so, yes.
So maybe some people listening could take a few tips from what we say today.
I think you've got to think of a different way of marketing, because normally manufacturers do it exactly the same way. They get a fancy new website, They put a little bit of social media out, and then probably a month later all that stops, and then they're just left with the website. Yeah. So,
which will last probably 5 years or more before they do a new one.
Exactly, and then it looks really out of date, and then probably the machines they've got within the business aren't even featured on that website.
Yeah. So we are being critical about it, but I do see a lot of very poor efforts on the marketing. And yet it can still be successful if you've got your niche and you know.
It can, but also I think manufacturers need to change, because the market is changing. So certainly during the pandemic, more and more buyers, purchasers they're not going out to meetings or networking meetings or clubs. They are just looking online, or they're just looking on LinkedIn. So you have to raise your profile.
Yeah, and I guess there's lots of stats. We've mentioned these before on the podcast of how many buying decisions at least start online and sometimes continue and end online as well, even if maybe more and more have a face-to-face meeting.
More and more end up online now, where you won't even meet the buyer. You'll just go through a procurement process. You'll quote online, you'll win it online, you'll get the purchase order online, and you won't even meet the person you're dealing with.
And some of these could be reasonably big expenditure, big ticket items.
Absolutely, they could be big.
So let's come on a bit more in a minute then to some of the particular challenges that manufacturers face. But I did want to touch on, I mentioned it in the intro there, that you inspired us to do what we're here doing today, our podcast. because you are a veteran of these things, and don't be bashful. But how many have you done now?
So I think we're on 158 this week, 158. So over 3 years worth.
Impressive. This is episode 42, so we feel very humble next to you, Chris. Thank you very much. But I remember watching your earlier ones and thinking, this is great. This is a way of engaging in a different style. So who did you follow? What made you do it to start with?
It was mainly during the pandemic. So we were working from the office. We were very much desk bound. We couldn't get out and see customers or suppliers, couldn't do any face-to-face meetings. And I've worked with a couple of guys, Stuart Whitehead and Joe Reynolds, who do a lot of work on social media, video content. And they said, look, why don't there's a niche for a manufacturing podcast. And we started from there. So the first ones, I look at them now and there were lots of mistakes made along the way.
We've done that with us.
Lots of lessons learned. Yeah. But I really enjoy it. It allows me to meet new businesses, network, raise the profile of our business. But also, I think just that engagement. People are looking for a different way of engaging with manufacturing businesses.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go as far as to say you're famous as a result of it. Legend in your own lunchtime maybe, but you are getting recognised.
I am getting recognised, and that's not always a good
spooky?
It is a bit, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy just the people I've met, the businesses I've met, and there's some really inspiring people. And when you get people in front of the camera, some people really don't like it. Some people love it. And I just say, well, all we're doing, like today, we're just having a conversation about your business. And that's all it is. So they're quite comfortable selling when they're meeting someone, but you put a camera in front of someone, it changes the dynamic. Yeah,
unless you can get them relaxed first. So I knew this was going to be one of the easiest guest podcasts we've ever done, because you're a veteran of this. You can teach us a few tricks.
Well, maybe.
Thinking just on that point, because I think some of our audience do sort of prod themselves every now and again to think, well, maybe I should be doing a podcast. I don't think many of them have taken the step yet, unlike we have following you. But if somebody did, what would you say, thinking back to those early stages of your own one, what were the key sort of lessons or things that you would do differently?
I think the very first thing, I always thought that I'd get a guest on and I didn't want it to come over really rehearsed. I wanted to quite have a natural style. So I never told the guests what I was going to ask them or really the content. So when guests came on, the first ones where I hadn't prepared them at all, they were not quite shell-shocked, but they were umming and ahhing and wondering what the next question was going to be. And you could see it in their eyes. They were on edge. So very quickly, I understood that they needed to be really comfortable. So I now share the questions. So I got to about episode 10 or 11. I thought, why am I not sharing the questions with them? Why am I not letting them prepare so they're really comfortable?
And is it the same set of questions each time?
The first and last is always, so tell me about your business and what you do. And the last question is always, what does the next year, 2 years hold for your business?
Okay. Yeah, good.
And in between, I always look. So I do some research. I go on their website. I speak to them. I say, have you got any exciting news that you want me to prompt and bring out of you? So it's always around the business. Obviously, we had the pandemic, we had Brexit, we had all of those, so they were focused on those, some of the questions. Now they're more focused on sustainability, carbon reduction, and it's also about job creation. So it was always meant to promote UK manufacturing, so I try never to have bad news on it.
Yeah.
It's always about job creation, factory opens, new processes, new product, and just sort of promoting their business.
So it's a bit like a trade magazine in podcast style for the manufacturing sector.
Absolutely. But I've had people it started as, it's called SME Focus, and it started just as SME manufacturers. Mm-hmm. But it's quite strange how quickly your little black book of people sort of dries up after 150.
Yeah.
So now I get people from bigger businesses. I also get people who support the sector. So maybe someone from the Chamber of Commerce or Make UK, or the Confederation of British Metal Formers, and again, they then bring their members in who want to promote.
And are you getting a nationwide reach to that from the guests?
I think we are, but it's because it's hosted through MTD, who do lots of video content anyway. So they're using it as on their website. They're using it as podcasts as well. I share it through LinkedIn and Twitter, so we're getting a nice reach.
Yeah, no, it's good. Well, it's interesting to reflect back. And when I've watched them, I haven't watched all 150 odd, I have to confess, Chris, but I've watched a few. I do get the sense that when you have guests coming on, whether this is because you set it up that way or just the way they interpret it, they are very much in selling mode. It's almost like they're doing their company pitch a little bit. Now,
Are
you asking them to do that?
I'm not asking them to do that, but that's how it comes over. So the first question, tell me about your business and what you do. That's their sort of elevator pitch. That's their 30 seconds. And I quite like that because people need to understand who the guest is.
Yeah.
So I'd rather they did that. And it does come over a little bit salesy, but then that's why people like it. They like to get on the show. So now I get people coming to me saying, can I be a guest on the show?
It's a free advertising platform for them. It's a bit of their marketing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I understand that. I'm wondering, do you ever get them to really unpack a knotty subject and have a debate about something where there isn't an easy answer, some pros and cons, and almost demonstrate that they're thinkers in their industry rather than just saying, we've got a new machine and we've got this capacity and aren't we great? And
I do. I get them to talk about things like the lack of industrial strategy, energy prices, but I try not to make it too contentious because it can get to the point where A, they feel uncomfortable, or the audience are expecting something from that conversation. Yeah. So we've done a couple of specials. We've done women in engineering. We've done apprenticeship specials, and maybe we need to touch on further sort of things going forward. But I don't want it to be too contentious.
Yeah, I think that's probably a slight difference then with the style we're going for, where we're trying to unpack ideas.
Absolutely.
And we don't necessarily get guests on just to be a marketing platform for them. I think they both work differently, and they're good complements for each other. The style that we've got, I think we're trying to go for by association type of benefit. There's someone here talking about a subject which clearly they know a lot about. They don't have to tell me that they've got this new machine or whatever. Yes. But of course, then you're left guessing a bit. So I think there's a place for both.
Absolutely.
And do you tend to get the owners and managing directors on, or is it generally the sales and marketing people you attract?
I try and get the owners and managing directors, but they're not always the ones who are comfortable in front of the camera. So it can be the sales, can be the marketing. I've had apprentices on. It's a wide range. I just want someone who knows the business inside out and is passionate about the business and willing to be in front of the camera, because not everyone wants to be in front of a camera.
No, that's right. Some take more persuading than others, don't
Absolutely.
They? And Jim, if you're out there, I'm coming to get you. I've been persuading some of my contacts to come on here since we started. I think gradually they're falling down and coming on the show, which is great. Okay, so let's talk then. So that's great. Thanks a lot for that, Chris, and thanks again for inspiring us. It's got us to where we are, and when I think back to our early ones, gosh, yes, we've moved on a bit. For anybody who's been watching for all of our 42, and hopefully we'll get to 150. Let's talk a bit about our subject today then, which are the challenges in particular for manufacturers in and around marketing, and that's why it was relevant talking about the podcast really, because coming on your podcast is an absolutely gold-plated opportunity to do some marketing. And yet people are often doing selling. And that's why I was sort of quite interested in how they regard that. They probably don't necessarily think too much about it beforehand. They just think, I'm coming on to have a chat.
Yes.
And they don't know, how are they going to use that material? Are they going to just share your post on LinkedIn? What are they going to do about it? But I think, as we said earlier, manufacturers have a bigger challenge. It's not just that they're not good at this stuff. It's harder to do when you're trying to sell some of the stuff that manufacturers have to sell. It's B2B for a start, which brings its whole new challenges. We'll come on to that in a minute compared to business to consumer. But the products themselves, if we start with that, quite often what a manufacturer is selling is quite complex. We're not just selling, a lump of metal or something that anybody can understand. And quite often the nuances of what my £1 million piece of kit or 10,000 this, that, or the other does, it's hard to always get that across.
It is. It's hard. So, you've got to introduce someone to the business. Then you've got to introduce someone to probably the people within the business, who are the team who are going to sell and support you once you get the product. And then it's about the processes. So how do you differentiate what you do from a competitor? Because you can all, in metal pressing, you can all have the same type of presses. So how are you going to differentiate yourself? And that's the marketing rather than selling.
Yeah.
So you've got to raise your profile high enough that people come to you first, or at least you're on the quote list, and then you've got to convince them that you can sell the product to them. So it's a really hard, it's a balancing act, because you've got to be the best at what you do, but you've also got to keep convincing people you're the best at what you do.
And do you get much into the technical side with your marketing, or do you more talk about the business benefits, the commercials and the delivery?
It's more about the business benefits, but also showing the capability, because people in our market know what the product is. Yeah. So they know really what we can do, what our competitors can do. So it's really about just constant marketing and constant, I call it marketing selling, because it's the buyers now move on so quickly. You've constantly got to introduce yourself to new buyers all the time.
Even in the same companies?
Even in the same companies. So people like JLR, Nissan, whoever it be, they're constantly moving. So every 6 months, you've got to convince somebody new that you're the right supplier and you can make it on time, the quality's right, and you can sell it at the right price. And that's a constant churn.
That's interesting, because we have this buyer's journey acronym of awareness, consideration and decision. That's how we break out the sort of 3 stages.
Yep.
And it sounds like rather than considering a firm going through that, a potential customer going through that cycle, you may well have several people within the firm all at different stages on that journey. And some of them, if they just joined the buying department or the new engineer from another company, they may still be at that very early awareness stage, just needing to know what is your pressing and these newer versions you've got now, which go much deeper drawn, and the innovations in your industry. They won't be aware of that.
They won't be aware of that. So you've got to convince the existing buyers that you've got the new capability, you're better than the competitor. But then you're also convincing the new buyers, well, what do you do? So it's a different way of marketing. You've got to put out lots of different content, I find now, just to keep up with the market.
And do you think, we'll come on to other businesses as well, but I'm interested in how SDE Technology do it. Do you think that within a company, a target company, a prospect, or maybe even an existing customer, that you're trying to come up with different material for different departments even? So someone, say in finance, who will have a role in signing off this CapEx when it comes through, are you producing material for them, or do you let the internal people sort of translate what they want to the finance people?
That's an interesting question. So I think the content we put out is more for that business. It would be quite interesting to start putting that content out in slightly different formats for slightly different people. So that's an interesting point that we don't do at the minute.
No, it's interesting. Something that we do with some of our clients is to produce something called a buyer's guide. And we deliberately called it that. It's kind of a bit of a euphemism, really. It's a bit of an idiot's guide. The idea is that we know there are people within a buying company that it's not their job to know what's being bought by, let's say, the engineering director or something, but they still feel as if they should know a bit more about it. So we produced this buyer's guide, which could be read by someone in finance or HR or whatever, but it's written for the layperson, for them to understand the basics. And we strip it right back to the beginning. And sometimes we get pushback from clients who say, well, that's too noddy, too basic. We don't need that. Our customers don't need that. And we say, well, just think more broadly about who your customers are. Who are the various decision makers in that process? And it's not just the person who knows all this stuff already. They've got to promote it internally. So we're almost helping them to do their job in getting their audiences
That's
internally.
an interesting point. And sometimes I look at the sort of content we put out, and I think it's not techie, but it's probably not plain enough for the layperson. But then if you go completely open and say this is actually what a metal pressing is, I don't know whether that would work. You'd have to find some way of filtering it so it didn't go out to all customers, or
sure, or at least make it clear that this is intended for people as a basic introduction. Pressings 101 type of guideline. So, okay, broadening that out then to other companies. You've spoken to 150 odd companies over the time. Lots of them in manufacturing, some supplying it. What do you think would characterise the way they're doing their marketing then when they have complex products? Do you see good examples of that, or are people all sort of struggling in the same way?
I think all people are struggling in the same way. I think they're trying to sell. You can either sell something new to an existing customer, or you can sell something new to a new customer, and it's getting the balance of, I've got something really good here, how do I actually sell that? Do I just sell it through the existing channels, or do I do something completely different, or hire a marketing team and really push it ahead? So I think most manufacturers are quite comfortable in their current marketing role, and the way they sell, they will just pitch to the same people, pitch to the same customers in the same way. I think there's a lot of innovation that could go on. I like to think we do a good job, but we're probably quite a long way behind lots of other people outside manufacturing.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how we could change what we do radically. And I think most manufacturers will go along with their current marketing and just make slight tweaks. I don't see very many making big changes.
I can understand that. And I guess lots of them, if they've got long-running production orders rather than one-offs, they've got a reasonably stable customer base already. They have lots of repeat work. They're more in nurture mode, really.
Absolutely.
Continuing to keep in touch. They're not really in growth mode.
No, it's taking customer orders and just customer management.
Yeah, account management in its broader sense.
I mean, what we started doing, the reason we started doing sort of social media, LinkedIn and Twitter, was when we put our powder coating line in 2012. We've now got 2. and we had to sell in a different way. So it was different customers. It was very proactive. So if you get it wrong today, people don't come back. There's no tooling involved. So you've got to be really good, and you've got to tell people all the time what you did. So up until that point, we never did any marketing for the business because our customers knew us.
Yeah.
But now the environment's changed. As I said, buyers move on very quickly. So you've got to keep pushing that marketing, that selling all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings me on to the next area I want to discuss really, which is identifying the audience.
Yep.
Unlike business to consumer companies, they can just broadcast stuff. They can put on TV advert or radio or something. Nearly everybody could well be in the market, okay, depending on the product, but a much larger hit rate.
Yes.
If you're selling a metal pressing, there's not much point putting a radio advert on, right? So you've got to choose your channels carefully.
Yes.
And even if you go on LinkedIn where you think professionals are, that's full of loads of people that aren't interested. 99+% of the audience aren't wanting a metal pressing, right? 99.9 even.
Yeah.
So how do you get in there? Do you just have to keep the black book of people and grow it gradually, or what do you do to attract the strangers into your ecosystem?
It is very much. So we've got existing customers. We've got customers historically that have moved on. We're always looking for new markets. So we were, in 2009, we were 90% automotive. We are now 50% automotive. So we've got a lot of yellow goods, white goods in there. So there's always opportunities, and there's always slightly too much capacity in the whole supply chain. So there's always people struggling, and there's always people cutting down to the bottom line, which we don't do. So it's really about not just that black book, but making connections. So what I found with the podcast, I'm just making connections all the time. So it's subconsciously they're hearing a message from SDE Technology.
So actually the podcast has helped you in other ways as well. I mean, I know it's very subtle and
it's very subtle, but it's really, when you look at clever marketing or selling, it's about the network. The bigger the network, the bigger chance you've got of having someone who then wants a relationship, but also wants to buy a metal pressing. So if you've got 100 connections on LinkedIn, you might have one who wants a metal pressing. You've got 30,000 connections.
Yeah,
you
it's
might
a
have
numbers
100
game
people.
to that.
And when you look at marketing, it is actually a numbers game. So I started Twitter in 2012, and I actually spoke to a really clever guy, Grayson from Shrewsbury Morris Dancers.
Oh, really? Right, okay.
And at that point, they had 45,000 followers on Twitter, which were more votes than Daniel Kaczynski got when he got elected. So they've got a bigger reach than he has as the MP.
As the Morris Dancers.
Exactly. And you just think, and he said, whatever you do, just plan your social media. So have a little calendar and make sure you're putting a post out whenever you want to put it out. Because lots of people have social media and they do a big push, maybe at the start of the month, or they've got a new product, and then a month later you never hear from them again. So it's about consistency all the time, which I found.
Well, I refer our listeners back to some of our earlier podcasts where we talk about this. And as you know, we're both aware of HubSpot, and we're big advocates of it. And a bit like other products like Hootsuite or whatever, you can schedule it. But it has to be done as part of a campaign. You've got to have a story you're telling, and it has to ebb and flow through the year. There has to be a purpose to it. Yeah. And maybe not just promoting the fact that it's Christmas, so here's our advent calendar, it's Easter.
Absolutely, and a lot of things you see are just, somebody will put a post out or a tweet, whatever it is, and then the first one they put out, the second one they put out is, we want to sell you this.
Yeah,
and
they're not nurturing, are they?
It just turns people off straight away. So you've got to, it's about building connections, and the one thing I don't do is get a connection and then follow up with an email saying, I want to sell you something. Because you just turn people off.
It can take years, can't it?
Yes, it can.
And the other thing that, I don't know what your view is of this, but the other thing that turns me off when I see people's social feeds going this direction is when the individual in charge of it starts to let their personality and interests come through.
Yes.
And so if I, in the middle of learning about something maybe technical or seeing what they're doing, we get a post about Strictly Come Dancing starting again. It's not, I don't care. That's not where I'm here for. Exactly. You're wrong audience. You're crossing over a line there, which immediately makes my hackles go up.
Yes.
Do you think there's a place for that? Is that just showing someone's human side, or do you think that is crossing a line?
It's a hard one. I think there is, if you're a business owner, people want to know, A, about your business, but they also want to know about you. So they do want to know your views on certain things. But you have to be really careful, depending on your target audience. You can normally look at who's either following you or connected with you, and if they're not related to the business, that's fine. But if they're just related to your business, they're basically following you for your business. So at that point, you don't need to mention Strictly Come Dancing or the Bake Off or whatever it is.
It strikes me of a desperation to get a post out today. I've been told by my boss I need to do a post every day, and I've got nothing to say, so I'm going to talk about something.
And if you haven't got something to say every day about your business, well, you're doing something wrong. Because every day I can see something in my business that's great, and it's different every day. And if you're not enthused, or it proves you're doing social media just because you should be doing social media. That's not what social media is about.
And the other one I see as well, which I would ask our listeners to consider, is if your bulk of your activity on, let's say, LinkedIn, which we have to admit is one of our sort of mainstays of social, isn't it, in business, if it's mainly reposting other people's stuff, if you're not actually adding any of your own content, I'm not sure how I regard that. That doesn't really inspire me too much.
It doesn't. And again, if you look at a post, if you can't say something interesting about it, either the post wasn't very good, or I see lots of people either retweeting, reposting, and that's all they do, and they've never put any
anything
content
of their own to it.
So they're just doing it because they think they should be doing it.
Yeah.
I put a regular post out every Monday just to sort of create something on LinkedIn around UK manufacturing. And again, I've done that for 2.5 years. And I respond to the comments because I want people to comment. I want those conversations.
The conversation, yeah.
That's the whole point of it.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing, which I think a lot of manufacturers will find as a challenge, is just the time it takes to go through the sales cycle.
Yes.
Now, even if you're selling a considered purchase in a more consumery end of the world, you might imagine that a decision could still take maybe a month or two. If you're buying, a car or a washing machine, it's probably some of those will be a lot quicker. In manufacturing, it can take forever. If you're selling into a production line, if you're on the next JLR product, this could be a 3 or 4 year journey.
Absolutely.
And even if you're selling a piece of CapEx into a production line, which might even be a replacement piece of kit, it could still be a year away until the window of opportunity opens and the budget's available and the shutdown lines up and everything else. So how do you think manufacturers deal with that challenge, that marketing doesn't have a very short feedback loop? You don't know sometimes for a long time whether what you've done is working or not.
And I think that's the struggle that most manufacturers have is we're used to seeing results. So if you make a change on the shop floor and it's improvement, great, you see a result. Marketing can take months, years to pay back. And that's the real thing. So when times are tight, the easiest thing to cut back on is marketing because you don't see the results straight away. But I can see the results for our business year on year on year. And you have to keep promoting. If you're not promoting, you're standing still. And if you're not promoting as well as your competitor, you're going backwards.
Yeah. Do you think owners of manufacturing businesses who tend to be more techie understand that?
I think they're getting more understanding of it. I think they would rather be techie and maybe on the shop floor, and the marketing and selling isn't exactly what they do. And most businesses in Shropshire are sort of second generation owners who are passionate about the business. And if you get them in front of a camera, they will be passionate about the business.
I bet, yeah.
But they don't really see the value in marketing the business.
Yeah.
But that's the only way now that you can bring customers in. The days of just going to a networking meeting, picking up lots of work, they're long gone.
Yeah,
there's a place for them, but the thing
for
is
a different
now,
thing, maybe. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a different way of selling, and I think business owners are cottoning onto that. But again, manufacturers, we're slightly slow to pick things up in terms of marketing.
I'm trying to think. Do I know any manufacturing business, and we've dealt with hundreds in one way or another over the years, and you've dealt with even more, where there's a marketing director who's regarded as a senior position on the board?
No, I can't think of any. There's probably marketing and sales, and for me, I see sales and marketing going hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So I do the sales, I do the marketing, and it's putting a consistent message out.
That's quite common, isn't it? And yet,
it is,
you could argue they're very different disciplines.
They are very different.
Personality that leads to someone being good at one is sometimes quite different to the other.
Yes, and certainly if you look at sales and commercial, well, they're really separate.
Yeah,
but again, they're bundled up a lot of time
I suppose
together.
It's inevitable in a small and medium-sized business, which is the audiences we're talking to. You have to combine roles. You often get finance and IT, or HR and health and safety, or even all those four all in one person. In a small company, it's needs must. But as you grow, then maybe splitting those ones out, and perhaps even sales and marketing. But I really don't see even larger manufacturing companies seeing that marketing role rise up until you get to the size of, say, a Black & Decker or something like that.
Absolutely, but then normally they're outsourcing the marketing at that point.
And it's a consumer product, that. So if you're manufacturing and you're a large company and you're B2B, they're a bit of a rarer beast, aren't they, really?
They are, and it's that B2B. It's our target market they're not going online to buy a metal pressing. They're going online to make a connection, find a supplier, and then it might be 3 years' time before they actually give you any inquiries. So it's a different way of selling.
You mentioned as well the fact that in tough times, the marketing budget tends to be one of the first to get cut alongside the trading budget or whatever, which is, we would all say is the wrong thing to do, but we're not running businesses and everyone has to make their own decisions. I get that. I think the unfortunate thing that helps to drive that thinking as well is that marketing has quite a flywheel effect.
Yes.
So it's not just that if you stop marketing, all benefits are gone, as long as you've set about doing your marketing in a way that you have evergreen content.
Yes.
So if you're entirely relying on social posts, then you stop those, sure enough, your traffic's going to dry up. But if you've been working on other things that have driven natural inbound search traffic, because your SEO is good, because your content's great, and you're producing ebooks and downloads and all of that, then we've even found clients who, in a tough time, they have stopped the marketing effort, and yet a couple of months later, they'll send me another email, got another new customer yesterday because of that thing we did a year ago. Yeah, and they downloaded the ebook, they've got in touch with us, and they've signed up.
Yeah, so if you put out really good content, you should be able to reuse that content.
Yeah.
The social media posts they're there and they're gone.
Yeah, they're very
the
ethereal.
LinkedIn post, you might get a week or 2 weeks out of it, but after that, nobody looks at them.
But you can rehash old articles, update them, make them relevant, and re-promote them.
Yes, there's ways of doing it, but as you say, cutting that marketing budget. We all hope in tough times you're going to want to bounce back.
Yeah.
So you need to really double down on the marketing or the selling, because that's where you're going to get your profit.
So there's lots of challenges, and I'm not trying to preach to manufacturers to saying that there's easy fixes to this stuff. It is tough. You're dealing with a complex product and a complex message to an audience that's hard to identify in an environment where marketing isn't really regarded as important. All these challenges are against you.
Yeah.
But I am just hoping that if you're in a manufacturing company in a marketing role listening to this, then maybe just start to explore some of the other ways that you can get your message out there.
Absolutely.
Maybe podcasts even.
It'd be good to hear from people with their experiences of how either difficult they're finding it, or some might be finding it really easy. Some might be just saying, well, we've got the golden nugget and we know what to do.
Yeah, we're not telling anybody.
Exactly. Well, dear.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if this theme crops up in any of your future podcasts, Chris.
Yes.
I'll be interested in those. Maybe even I'll come along and we can have this chat on your patch. Yeah, that'd be quite interesting to reverse the roles.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome. I'm always looking for guests.
There you go. Well, great. Thank you very much again, Chris, for coming on our podcast.
Thank you, Dave.
Very good of you to share your experiences, and thank you again for inspiring us to be here.
Thank you.
We wouldn't be here without you. So thanks again for watching this week's episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Every week we try to come up with a different subject and sometimes different guests to just show you something interesting to talk about in your efforts to grow your business. As ever, please subscribe and follow to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from, and click the little bell icon so that you get notified when a new episode drops. And perhaps more importantly, as I ask every week, just tell your friends about it. Good old-fashioned, pick up the phone, drop them an email, tell them that you've found this new podcast that might be worth listening to, and tune into Chris's one as well, the SME Focus podcast from OTD. So thanks a lot again, and good luck with your business. Ta-da.